Who wanted Ash Rowell dead?
It wasn't going to be Mr. Green with the candlestick in the library. It was much more complicated than that.
But some say it's not complicated at all.
I know who did it. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind.
And who did it?
Just simply being around Ash Rowell made people feel good.
Charlotte, tell me about Ash. What kind of person was he?
Ash was just a big-hearted, kind-hearted, happy-go-lucky from the time he was a young baby.
After high school and college, Ash attends law school, but realizes after graduating, law isn't his cup of tea. Pints of beer are what he's more passionate about. And lucky for him, getting a job won't be hard.
Tell me about the family business.
My husband and I began an import company called McDuff Imports. And Ash grew up in the business. He was often the most popular kid in his class because he had access to some fine beers. Kids traveled with us to Europe to the breweries. So they were kind of imbued in the business, so to speak.
Ash joins a family business but doesn't rest on his laurels. He takes the Houston area company to a whole other level, building on the family's success by creating an entire new division.
And he helped build a successful one.
Absolutely. Ash was the face and the muscle and brains of Duff Beer distribution.
Ash Rowell was one of the pioneers of bringing craft beer to Texas.
Were you guys close?
Yeah, he was a very good friend of mine, and everybody loved him.
And soon, Ash would fall in love himself.
How did Ash meet Leslie?
Ash met Leslie through Leslie's brother, Brian Lamb. And Brian told Ash that his sister was in the middle of a divorce and was not happy with her lawyer. Could Ash please meet with her and talk to her about it? And he did, and he and Leslie seemed to hit it off.
And do they ever hit it off? Within a couple of months, Leslie gets pregnant. They marry soon after.
What was your impression of Leslie?
Leslie was sweet and nice. I think, I was her new mother-in-law, so she was being very nice to me. And I had empathy for Leslie at the time Ash met her because she had a young child that was 2 who was just recovering from severe cancer, and then she was pregnant. So woman to woman, I had a lot of empathy for Leslie.
As both Ash's work and home life are thriving, he decides to blend the two worlds even more when he brings his brother-in-law, Brian Lamb, into the family business.
Tell me about Brian.
Ash came to me and said, I think we should hire Brian. He's got an accounting background. And so we did, and he was an asset to begin with.
You say to begin with.
As the time went on, Brian began slacking a little bit in his attendance and bossing some of the other employees around a lot, so it was divisive. And then we had some issues with finances.
You fired him?
I did.
But terminating Brian Lamb does not go well. He turns around and sues Charlotte and Ash.
What was the resolution of the lawsuit?
We mediated and we paid Brian a sum of money, basically just to go away.
Charlotte admits they paid Lamb a hefty settlement.
And he went away.
He left the company.
A couple of years later, Ash is approached by some heavyweights in the beer industry. The Rowell family ends up selling Duff Beer distribution for an undisclosed amount. Life is quite good. Until one night when all of Ash's taps run dry. It's around 7:30 on a February Friday night. Leslie and Ash are home with their now 3 children. The 2 oldest have friends over for a sleepover. Just out of the shower, Ash is wearing only sweatpants, no shirt or shoes, when he hears something at the front door.
Ash opened up the door ever so slightly, and he's shot directly in the chest from a fairly close range, and the person runs off.
Moments later, Charlotte, who lives just a few doors down with Ash's father, Wayne, is startled by some out-of-the-norm neighborhood activity.
I was standing in my kitchen, and I saw the fire truck and paramedics go by, and I just went to the door and I saw that they stopped at Ash's house.
Charlotte leaves her husband, who is suffering from severe Alzheimer's, and runs to their son's house. When she arrives,
I walked into the most horrific scene that a mother could ever walk into, and I saw Ash laying over in the family room. There were paramedics who came to me and said, no, he's gone.
Did you at this point know it was a homicide, or
No.
you had no idea what was going on?
I knew Ash was dead. I saw a lot of blood, that's all I knew at that point.
When Houston Police Detective Brian Harris gets to the Rowell home, the scene is chaotic. Few details start to emerge.
At the front porch, just slightly outside the front door, is a shell casing. That's an indication to me that the person who fired this weapon was outside. There's no forced entry on the door. There's no other markings on the door entrance. And as you walk in there towards their back stairs in the living room is a pool of blood. And Leslie is there with her children and her children's neighborhood friends. In speaking with neighbors, they describe a dark-colored sedan that perhaps was seen leaving that area. But other than that, it was a typical night in the neighborhood.
Investigators bring Leslie down to the station for questioning. The detective begins by asking what she, Ash, and the kids did that day. Leslie tells him, among other things, she and Ash worked from home. They went to lunch, then Ash picked up the kids from school. Then around 7:30 in the evening, Leslie says she was in the back of the house with the kids. She thought Ash was in the kitchen making a bottle for their 1-year-old when she heard a noise.
I heard a bang, and I thought something might have fallen on Ash, but then I remember knowing instantly, well, that's strange, because then he knows when things, like, you run into something, we always say, we're okay, you know, but he didn't say anything. So the next thing I see is him running towards the family room, because there's double glass doors, and he goes, and I ran over there, and he collapsed, and there was blood spewing out of his chest. So then I ran over to him, and I was like, oh my God, what happened? Oh my God. And he said, they got me. I'm dead.
He said, they got me. What does they mean to you?
His wife, Leslie Rowell, is now at Houston PD headquarters sharing her husband's dying declaration.
He said, they got me. I'm dead. And I said, no.
Did he mention anybody's name?
No.
Then Leslie shocks detectives, pointing the finger at her own family.
What does they mean to you?
They means Brian and Rick.
And Brian and Rick are?
My brothers, my older brothers.
Okay.
Leslie says there's a long, sordid history with her brothers, who are estranged from the family. Things used to be fine with Brian Lamb until he was fired by and then sued Ash and his mother, Charlotte Rowell.
And what makes you automatically think of Brian and Rick?
They threatened us in the past, and we've been afraid of them. They're just kind of thugs.
Ash's mother, Charlotte, reiterates her daughter-in-law's unwavering opinions.
I know who did it. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind.
And who did it?
Brian and Rick Lamb hired somebody to do it, I believe.
What's the reasoning why Brian and Rick are the first people to jump into your mind?
Because they'd already threatened to do this. I don't think they were stupid enough to come do it themselves.
Okay.
And our grandson heard his dad talking to someone at the door. And then he heard the shot. If Rick or Brian had been standing there, I believe Ash would have slammed the door and run for the back to protect his family.
Despite all that, this is no open and shut case. Cops begin looking at the Lamb brothers and many others. Detective Phil Waters, now retired, was one of the lead investigators.
Most homicides are either going to be, sex, drugs, or money. So this one could have been money. We never saw any indication that there was a drug paradigm.
Any evidence that Ash was cheating on Leslie?
Not that we found, no.
Well, who were the early suspects?
The early suspects were Brian Lamb, Rick Lamb. We looked at Leslie. We looked at Charlotte. We looked at the possibility of her husband, who had Alzheimer's, who's prior military, may have had an Alzheimer's episode of some kind.
Were you able to eliminate people and say, all right, no longer suspects in my book?
There have been a couple. Charlotte Rowell has been eliminated, and Rick Lamb.
So detectives are able to eliminate Charlotte and Leslie's brother, Rick Lamb, but only after Lamb was arrested for federal bank fraud and agreed to sit down and talk with investigators.
Well, did he give any useful information regarding Ash's murder?
He didn't really give us any viable information, but we were able, after the end of that conversation, to feel pretty comfortable that Rick had nothing to do with what had happened to Ash.
So what about his brother, Brian Lamb? According to Detective Waters, they requested an interview with him multiple times, but each time he declined.
No formal interview with Brian regarding Ash's murder?
No, none. But what was interesting was about a week after the murder, Brian had gone to a friend of his and had asked to borrow $10,000 for an attorney because Ash has been killed and they're going to come after me.
Maybe a good idea considering the threats Charlotte and Leslie told police Brian had already made.
It's like, I'm going to get you.
Okay.
You're going to pay for this. That was Brian.
But this wasn't the first time the alleged threats have come up. In Brian Lamb's lawsuit against Ash and Charlotte, everyone has asked about them in their videotaped depositions. Sitting in the room off camera for Ash's is Brian Lamb.
Anybody specifically ever make a threat against you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Mr. Lam.
Brian Lam?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, if you get rid of me, bad things will happen to you and your business.
That doesn't sound like a physical threat. Or did you take it as a physical threat?
I took it as a physical threat.
Okay. Anything else?
My wife has received 2 text messages.
Okay. One of those was produced during Brian Lamb's deposition?
Yes.
And what, you remember the rough description in that?
I'm going to get your husband and his mom. They can't hide from me.
At one point, Ash stops the deposition. The tension palpable.
Excuse me, counselor. I think your client's videotaping me.
I doubt it. We're videotaping it right there.
Well, yeah, but that's his personal video camera. He's already threatened me 3 times today by motioning that he was going to cut my neck. I've been threatened before, and I feel that he might be taking video to send to someone else.
Ash then tells opposing counsel he was and still is afraid.
I felt threatened. I feared for the personal security of myself and my family, and I do to this day.
In Brian Lamb's deposition, this time Ash and Charlotte are sitting off camera.
Isn't it a fact that you threatened Mr. Ash Rowell and his family if you were terminated from the business?
No.
Section 4. Isn't it a fact that you said to Mr. Ash Rowell and Ms. Charlotte Rowell that bad things would happen to them if you were pushed out of the company?
Section 4.
Didn't you, in fact, ask your brother to intimidate the Rowells by sending them threatening messages?
No.
Didn't your brother send a threatening text message?
Calm down.
Didn't your brother send a threatening text message to your sister who is married to Mr. Ash Rowell?
No.
That didn't happen?
No.
You've never heard that? No. This is the first time you ever heard that your brother, who was here earlier today...
It's the first time this morning I heard it, yeah.
What have you told your brother about this dispute?
That Ash and Charlotte stole my company. What else can I tell him?
At one point, Brian Lamb addresses his former colleagues and family members.
Look in your heart, Ash. You know it too. I hope you sleep good at night. You can stare at me too, Charlotte. Same thing goes to you. It's a human being.
Let's go off the record here.
Yeah, I think you need to get in control of your client. Let's go off the record.
Although Phil Waters is now retired and not officially working the case, he says, besides Brian Lamb, there's one other person they haven't been able to fully clear.
What's interesting is that out of the people you said you were able to rule out as suspects, you didn't mention Leslie, the wife.
Right. Leslie was brought back again for an interview, and this time she wanted to bring her attorney, which is fine. I can tell you from that last interview that was given, which was, I want to say, probably 3 years ago, she had made no contact with us inquiring as to the status of this investigation. So that is troublesome to me as a detective.
Has Leslie taken a polygraph test?
We asked Charlotte and Leslie to take polygraph tests. Leslie said she would only take a polygraph test if Charlotte took it first. Charlotte has taken the test. Leslie has not. In my mind, it's a little strange.
Do you think Leslie had any part?
I hope not, Jason. I don't know. I think Leslie knows more.
It's been 5 years since Ash Rowell was murdered. Phil Waters, one of the original detectives on the case, now retired, says there are two people they haven't been able to completely clear: Ash's brother-in-law, Brian Lamb, and Ash's wife, Leslie.
You find that odd?
I do. I don't think she'll give you a full-on interview.
But in this Crime Watch Daily exclusive, Leslie Rowell agrees to sit down and talk for the first time. And in the presence of her attorney, Paul Nugent, tells us her story, starting with their relationship.
Ash was a loving and sweet and fun man, generous with his time and his love and attention for our children and for us.
Leslie then takes us through that horrific night.
I was, playing with the kids, and I heard the gunshot, but, it just doesn't register. So I then said, called out his name, and that's when I saw him staggering towards me in the dining room, clutching his chest. That when he said, "They got me, I'm dead." And then he collapsed, literally in my arms. I just was hysterical, and I called our son to go get help. And he ran up, and he had to see his father. But he was so brave. He went next door and got our friend.
We asked Leslie who she thinks Ash was referring to when he said, "They got me." Remember that night she told Houston police detectives she knew exactly who they were?
They means Brian and Rick.
And Brian and Rick are?
My brothers, my older brothers.
Okay.
But now Leslie's less sure.
No idea.
Why does Leslie seem to change her story? We ask her another question about her brother Brian Lamb's alleged threats against Ash. Before answering, she turns to her attorney.
This is where I feel nervous.
Leslie and Nugent need a moment to talk off camera. They ask us to stop rolling, so we do. When the interview resumes, we ask Leslie again, reminding her she had already discussed the threats in the taped interview with Houston PD. This time, she answers.
I think it was kind of common knowledge that Brian did not like Charlotte and Ash and felt very angry and would threaten them.
So, does Leslie believe her brother is capable of murdering her husband?
I can't speculate on someone's capabilities. I can't fathom that he would do this to my children, to his own nephew and nieces. So you don't believe that. But then again, he was openly threatening.
And for anyone who may be suspicious of Leslie, she tells us she has cooperated with police over the years. We also asked if she has any knowledge of anything having to do with her husband's murder.
No. None.
Her attorney, Paul Nugent, says he believes Houston PD looked at Leslie as a suspect merely as a matter of protocol. Everyone was a suspect at the time.
Anyone who spends 5 minutes with Leslie knows she's not a suspect. This was a grieving widow. This was a grieving mom. She's not a suspect.
It's been 5 years since Ash's murder. Why is Leslie talking now to Crime Watch Daily?
Leslie wouldn't be participating in this if she didn't respect the show. And it has been successful. It has caught criminals who needed catching. It's exposed people to justice who need justice in the community. So Crime Watch Daily is important. This is a national show. There may be someone sitting in a bar in Cleveland who knows somebody who's from LA who got hired to do the hit in Houston 5 years ago. And that's how murders get solved. Leslie needs an answer. Her children need an answer.
I look forward to the day that they find out who did this. We miss him. We miss him.
Since our interview with Leslie, a lot has transpired. According to Paul Nugent, Leslie has since taken an independent polygraph test, and he tells us she passed. Nugent also says Detective Phil Waters told him he now believes Leslie is no longer a suspect in Ash's murder. And in regards to Charlotte's claim that Leslie knows more than she's saying, Nugent says, in part, Charlotte's accusation is irresponsible, mean-spirited, and not supported by any facts. We reached out to the Houston PD, wanting to talk with the detectives currently working the cold but open case. They got back to us with this statement which read, in part, given the fact that they are at a sensitive point in this investigation, the Houston police declined to do the interview because they don't want any additional details going out. We also reached out to Brian Lamb for an interview, but through his attorney, Philip Rackison, he declined. We asked Rackison about Lamb's lawsuit and the death of Ash Rowell, and he responded with, the matter was voluntarily settled. Beyond that, we have no comment. Ash Rowell's friends and family honor him every day while they wait and pray that justice will one day come.
What's it like when you pass this tank every day?
Honestly, dude, it makes me sad. It does. What a waste. What an absolute total waste of a beautiful human life.
What do you miss most about Ash?
I miss Ash's smile, his laugh, and his big teddy bear hugs. He had the best hugs in the world. Yeah. Good guy. The best.
What's your message to the individuals responsible for Ash's murder?
My message to those people, and I know there's more than one person involved in this, is I know who you are. You know who you are. And there's going to be hell to pay. That's my message.
Anyone with information is urged to call Houston Crime Stoppers anonymous tip line at 1-713-222-TIPS.